Hi there, it's February the 16th and we're continuing our progress through Mark's Gospel, and we are in chapter 1 and we're going through to chapter 2 and verse 12. In our reading today there are three stories of three different people. Jesus has been in the synagogue at Capernaum, and he comes out of the synagogue and goes to the house of one of his apprentices, Peter, and there he finds Peter's mother-in-law ill with a fever. And it simply says he goes in and he raises her up and the fever leaves her. So here's an encounter, Jesus coming and meeting with someone and dealing with their sickness immediately. And then it also says that many other people, having heard about this, many people are brought to Jesus for healing. And they find a place of release and a place of restoration in his work. But then something is declared here by Mark, which is very important. In Mark 1:35, in the midst of these stories of healing, we find Jesus going into a lonely place, into traditionally it's called a desert place, but really the word means the place of loneliness, the place of apartness. And this is the secret, it seems, of Jesus' powerful ministry, is he spends time with his Father. It's one of the things that's indispensable if we want to see the Lord move in our lives, if we want to see his kingdom coming through us, then time with him is indispensable. Jesus then encounters a leper, and a leper could be someone just with a very strong skin disease, but whatever the nature of this leper's condition, he is ostracized from the whole community. Lepers would live in communities. They had to ring bells to let people know they were coming. They had to shout unclean. But here Jesus encounters a leper, and the leper cries out to him and says, "Lord, make me clean." And Jesus is moved with compassion. He's moved with this deep, visceral moving within himself, and he reaches out and he heals the leper. Now, to touch a leper in those times for a Jew was considered to make yourself unholy. But Jesus nevertheless reaches out. He reaches out to the marginalized. He reaches out to those beyond, and he transforms him. He transforms his situation. Interestingly, Jesus says, "Don't tell anyone about this." Now, that's like giving someone £1 million and telling them not to spend it. Jesus is actually concerned that he doesn't just become known as a healer. He actually has more to him than that, and his unfolding story is going to be seen. But Jesus tells him to go through the process of ritual restoration into the community, because Jesus is concerned this man should no longer be ostracized from the community. He's not just concerned about his physical well-being, he's concerned about his social well-being, his emotional well-being. So he tells him to go and be integrated back into his community. But the man goes and tells everything. He can't help but tell how amazing this encounter has been. And then at the beginning of chapter 2, there's a very well-known story. Jesus is in a house, he's crowded in with people, and there's some friends who bring a paralyzed man on a bed to Jesus. They can't get into the house, so they go up onto the roof, and of course Middle Eastern houses in those times had flat roofs. They break through the mud and plaster roof, and they make a hole big enough. It must have been an amazing mess underneath as they did it, but they make a hole big enough to lower this man down in front of Jesus. Now, Jesus does something very interesting. The first thing he does is he looks at the man and he says, "Your sins are forgiven." Again, it's about a restoration of relationship that Jesus is more interested in than healing his body. Jesus is interested about wholeness, not just about our physical wholeness, but about our whole well-being. And so he restores him. And of course, the religious leaders who are there, who are listening in, are absolutely horrified that Jesus should take to himself something that only God is allowed to do. And so Jesus says, "So do you think it's a problem that I've done this? Well, how easy would it be to get this man up and walking?" He says, "So that you know that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins." And he turns to the man and he says, "Get up and walk." And the man gets up and walks. It's an amazing scene in this place. It witnesses to Jesus' power. It witnesses to Jesus' calling as the one who is here to bring earth to heaven, not just in terms of physical bodies, but in terms of our whole being, bringing us back, integrating us back into a relationship with God. One thing I want us to notice from this reading, as is central in the reading in 135, is this time spent with the Lord, this time spent in God's presence. It becomes the powerhouse, it becomes the engine of our very lives. And we want to continue to encourage one another to be with God, to be close to Him, because that's the source of our life and the source of our energy. Have a very good February the 16th.